Good afternoon, Patriots. This is the American Vision, broadcast on the TLBTV network and brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project. I'm your host, Bill Muckler. I'm the author of 2020, A Clear Vision for America, and the soon-to-be published 2020, A Clear Vision for Our Future, in which I discuss the Constitution, our culture, and our country. A lot of people are looking forward to reading that book, and I'm working on trying to get it finished myself right now. I'm broadcasting from my home studio where I write these books, and I also write articles and publish a newsletter and do this TV show and do a lot of other things to bring you the news in a certain way that you haven't seen it before. I try to bring everything to you with a unique perspective. The topic of conversation in a lot of news today is on the taxes, and I've already covered that. So I want to cover something different today, and I'm going to make a statement that some of you may agree with, some of you may question, and some of you may really need to think about. So here's what I'm going to say. Get the UN out of the US and the US out of the UN. We don't need them polluting our country anymore. They've been nothing but a disaster. In fact, I'm going to give you a quote by somebody in a little bit, but first I want to give you a little background on it. The United States was invited to join the League of Nations. This was back after World War I. And President Woodrow Wilson at the time supported that, but the Senate voted it down unanimously. And so we never did join the League of Nations, and it turned out to be a disaster. So after World War II, 1945, they came up with the idea we have to have a United Nations, which was going to be the League of Nations on steroids. And so let me read this from my book, and this is why you really need to get the book and read the book and find out what it's all about. The United States public and the Roosevelt administration supported and became founding members of the new United Nations. The United Nations has accomplished some good things according to its most ardent supporters, but has also been a gathering place for forces of corruption, greed, and deceit, as it fosters the self-serving interests of dictators and despots. Okay, so do you think the UN is doing something good? Do you know about Agenda 21? We're going to talk about that in the future too. Something you really need to learn about. And do you really think that everything they've done is good? How about the peacekeepers who don't really keep any peace, who've left us hanging out to dry, and their biggest accomplishment is typically raping women in the countries that they operate out of? So maybe you're thinking I'm a little jaundiced on this subject, that maybe I don't think too much of the United Nations. Well, I really don't. So let me read something else for you now. When the UN members negotiated the Arms Trade Treaty, that was the ATT, it was a bewildering experience. It was not a negotiation as Americans perceived negotiations. It was a series of puzzling, unconnected national interventions on particular points of interest. The actual drafting happened out of sight. That's the way they do everything, out of sight. Sound familiar to you? Why would we want to belong to an organization like that that covers everything up, that does everything out of sight? Now, here's a kicker. Let me tell you about this. Iran and North Korea were treated with as much formal respect as the United States and South Korea. Well, how can you accept that? How can you say that's a good thing? And how about their human relations committees or whatever they are, they have countries in there like Saudi Arabia, and Iran, or in Libya used to be on there. They, the head of the human relations, and what kind of human relations do they have? I mean, they're so crude and so barbaric about the way they treat people. And yet they're the ones who are calling the shots. That's what I'm trying to tell you about. Now, let me go a little bit further on this. And we're paying a lot of money. There's 5 countries that pay the biggest majority of the money into the United Nations. The United States pays the most amount. We pay so much, it's unbelievable. Got that? We're the ones who're footing the bill for this. And yet, guess what? They vote against us on just about everything. There's 193 nations involved in this, and they vote against us in all these, on all their votes. So let me tell you something else here. Here's some examples of the rampant hypocrisy of the United Nations and of its members and leaders. 1, United Nations sessions are filled with delinquent blather and nothing is ever done. The UN inability to handle international conflicts and protect member nations, they don't do that. They fail at this every time. They have no interest in that because that's not what they're there for. They're there to get free money from the United States. That's what their sole purpose is. The veto power of any one permanent member on the Security Council. You know about this? There's a Security Council of 15 members, but there's 5 members who vote. And if any one of those 5 members votes against something, that vetoes the entire thing. And guess who's on there? Russia and China, France, England, and us. Those countries really have our best interests at heart? I don't think so. It doesn't follow its mandate to maintain international peace and security. If they did, they would be taking care of some of these things that are happening, like they happen in Yemen or in Somalia and in some of the African countries, where all they've done is gone in there and raped and plundered and pillaged. They never kept any peace. They have an abysmal record on human rights, especially by the members that are put in authority. I've already kind of covered that a little bit. And their peacekeepers are totally ineffective. And they never condemn attacks on Israel, while they're always condemning Israel. Why are they condemning Israel? Why are they always in attack mode on Israel? Well, because Israel is America's best ally. That's why. They never censor aggressors like China and Russia. That never happens. They ain't never going to say anything about them. No. And are they paying money into it? No, I don't think so. They support these population control programs, but what did they do about the Ebola crisis? Remember when that happened a few years ago? The United States had to step in and take care of that. That was supposed to be a UN thing, but the UN never even considered it. Why not? Because they don't want to do anything like that. That's not their mission. Their mission is one thing: to take America down and make America into a third world country while they steal all of our resources and all of our money. That's the sole purpose of this. So why should we have them in the United States, and why should the United States be in the United Nations? Doesn't make any sense to me. I hope you're starting to see the picture of this now a little bit. So this 15-member Security Council that stymies all the proposals, that's ridiculous. How can we survive in something like that? How can we manage like that? So none of this is in our best interest. Well, if it's not in our best interest, why should we belong to it? Well, some people will say, well, wait a minute, we've got to take care of the rest of the world. We have to take care of them. Well, wait a minute. If we're taking care of them, don't you think that maybe they'd have some of our best interests at heart? Do you know what the aggregate voting is in opposition to the United States when the United States votes on something? 88%. That's what, when the votes against anything that the United States votes for, 88% of the members vote, at 88% of the time they vote against the United States. So they only vote with the United States 12% of the time. So if they're always voting against us, why are we giving them money? Back in 1976, a guy who was a senator of New York State, a very liberal leftist guy, his name was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He became the ambassador to the United Nations. He was there for 2 years. And you know what he did? He stepped down. He said, I don't want to have any part of it anymore. And you know what he called it? He called it a Squalid Circus. Hey, he called it a Squalid Circus. And he wondered, when will the U.S. finally figure out how to get out of this thing? Leave. That's what he wanted to do. He stepped down and got out of it, and he wanted the United States to get out of it. But did we do that? No. Well, then Jimmy Carter was president. He was pretty much of a United Nations type of guy. Well, if you figure the worst president in American history was for the United Nations, then that would tell you something. So most of these countries that are voting against us, we're giving them billions of dollars. We're giving away in this whole United Nations thing and this foreign aid thing more than $100 billion a year. Think of what we could use that money for here in the United States. Rebuilding our infrastructure, for example. A heck of a lot better than giving it to these despots and dictators who are putting it in their Swiss bank accounts. Well, come on, people. Let's get with the program. Let's take a country like Kuwait. Kuwait votes against the United Nations 67% of the time. Qatar votes against the United States 67% of the time. Morocco votes against the United States 70% of the time. The United Arab Emirates votes against the United States 70% of the time. And on. Every one of these, Jordan, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Algeria, Oman, Sudan, Pakistan, Libya, Egypt, all of them vote against the United States more than 70% of the time. And then there's Lebanon, who votes against the United States 80% of the time, India 81%, Syria 84%, Mauritania votes against the United States 87% of the time. I don't know if anybody's too concerned about Mauritania. And here's some of the countries that supposedly are our real good friends in the United Nations. I mean, they got the hands out too, right? Hey, Australia votes against the United Nations 44% of the time, Canada 51% of the time, Japan 58% of the time, France 46% of the time, and the UK 40% of the time. You know who is the only one who votes against the United States less than 40% of the time? You'll never guess. There's one country that votes against the United States only 11% of the time. The rest of them vote against the United States an aggregate of 89% of the time. And that's Israel, the country that we're told we're supposed to hate. Do you see this, folks? I'm giving you facts. Everybody's going by emotions. They say, oh, got to get against Israel. Look what they're doing to the poor kids in Gaza. Well, I don't know about all that. I don't know who started what. But I'm just talking about who backs us up and who supports us? You ever think about that? Here's another thing that I wrote from the book. The United States seems to be at odds with the rest of the world, or the rest of the world is at odds with us. Okay? Unbelievable. That's what we got going for us. So I mentioned Agenda 21. Does anybody know what Agenda 21 is? Well, folks, you're going to have to learn about this, because if you believe that a small limited government close to home is best for you and best for Americans, then how would you feel about having no say at all in your city, county, state governments, and everything was controlled through DC, Washington, DC, inside the Beltway? And they controlled everything, they manipulated everything, they ruled on everything, they administered everything. Everything was done out of one central place. Well, guess what? With Agenda 21, you don't have to worry about having us ruled by the political establishment in Washington, D.C. You'd better start worrying about being ruled by the despots and dictators and the frauds in the United Nations, because that's what it's all about. That's what the game plan is. That's the end game. They want to take over and run everything. They run the world. Have you heard about the New World Order that all of our politicians are for? Guess what? They're all for that. And of course, you know why they're for it, because they're lobbying for top spots in the New World Order. And we the people be damned. Well, let me tell you, you got to learn about this stuff, folks. You got to find out what's happening, because this is not this world is not all in favor of the United States. Now, you hear people say, well, the Americans have such a bad reputation around the world. We've been occupying every place. We've been starting wars everywhere. We've been guilty of taking down dictators and assassinating dictators. We've done all these horrible things, and this is a country that everybody hates. But wait a minute, they're all trying to get here, aren't they? Everybody's trying to get here for an opportunity. They're coming down from Canada. They're coming up from Mexico. They're coming into our ports. They're being smuggled into our ports like you wouldn't believe. Nobody talks about that. Are we going to build a wall around the ports? I don't think so. So we're not told all these things. But when you go in and you start studying all this and you start reading all this, and you've been around since as long as I have. See, I was around. I was 10 years old when this damn thing started. So I remember all this. I remember all these things that were happening. I remember those elections. I remember the peace talks. I remember all these things. Yeah, I remember, what happened at Malta. I remember all that stuff. I was paying attention. I was awake, and I was enlightening myself. But for whatever reason, I was just really interested in knowing what was happening in the world. And I saw what the political establishment was doing, and what they were doing to us was criminal. And they're so corrupt, and they don't consider us, and yet we're so into idolizing these corrupt politicians. We're so much we just adore our politicians and the political establishment, and yet they want. They're more brutal in some ways than some of these ancient kings were, that used to beat the serfs and steal all their money from them. That's what we've got to look forward to. So when I say get the U.S. out of the UN and get the UN out of the U.S., I actually mean get them off of our soil. And that was one of the things I was kind of disappointed in Trump, because you know what I wanted Trump to do? I wanted him to come in on January 20th, and one of the first things he did that January 20th day was say, you guys are out of here. I'm giving you 10 days to get out of here by January, or 11 days, I guess you'd give them, to January 31st. You're out of here. You're gone. You better get out of here. You better contact some moving companies to pack up your stuff and get out of here, and make some airline reservations to get back to where you came from. And for all you dictators and despots who are corrupting the UN, go find yourselves another place to do business, and leave us out, count us out, and then see how much money you can get to run this flawed, failed, corrupt organization of yours. This criminal organization. That's what it is. It's a criminal organization. Do you remember the food for oil program they had when back in the 1990s, when we wanted to put the pressure on Saddam Hussein? They came up with this bogus food for oil program. So we weren't going to give Iraq, who was under Saddam Hussein at the time, we weren't going to give them any stuff. You know, we weren't going to trade with them, but we're going to make sure that we gave them food so the people didn't starve. Well, what happened? They took all the money and they divided it up amongst themselves, and I guess they gave Saddam some of it to put in his Swiss bank account, and they all got rich out of this. And folks, I'm not making this up. You can't make this kind of stuff up. And they've been doing this stuff ever since 1945. They've been doing this stuff. They're unbelievably corrupt. And they don't care one bit about the United States. So why should the United States give one hoot about them? Okay, I think I about exhausted myself on this. I had a couple more things I was going to read out of my book, and let me go over a few things with you. If I can find out where all this stuff is. Oh gosh, what am I doing here? Anyway. In my book, I did come up with solutions, and I'm trying to look at them here, and I know this is kind of boring for you. You're wondering what's this crazy Muckler doing now? Anyway, I came up with some solutions because I think it's probably a good thing for the United States to have some sort of an arrangement or alignment or agreements with like-minded countries, not with countries who abuse their citizens, but with like-minded countries. And what I would like to see done is, when we pull out of the UN completely, is start our own association of countries. And maybe we just start out with about a handful, 4 or 5 or 6. That would probably be Canada and Australia and New Zealand and the UK. That'd be a place to start. I'm not sure if there's any other European countries we'd want to get involved in, because they're so heavy in this EU thing, which is a total disaster, and that's another corrupt mess. Whenever these countries get together, that's what it's all about. They're trying to control everything and manipulate everything so they can make a lot of money out of it. So I think there's some benefit to that. And I think there's some benefit, like I say, I want to eliminate all foreign aid. I think foreign aid is a joke. Why are we doing this? We're bribing these countries to like us, and they hate us, and they vote against us. What I would like to see us do is find some countries that want to be aligned with us, that want to get some help. Maybe some of these third world countries, maybe in Central America, or maybe a few countries in Africa, that would say, you know what? We'll clean up our mess if you'll give us some help. And I'm not saying give them money. I'm saying let us send some resources over to them in the terms of our people, put our people to work, give them jobs, and do something that would be kind of similar to maybe like a Peace Corps, but it would be more of a working corps where we would go over and build infrastructure for them, power plants and water treatment facilities. I've worked in all these places all my life. I've worked as a consultant in these places. I know how they work. I've actually worked in water treatment plants and construction of water treatment plants and operation of them. Guys used to say, "Where are you working?" I say, "Hey, I'm working in the sewer." It's kind of like Art Carn, if you remember him. He worked in the sewer. And power plants, this is what these countries need, and to build them some schools and show them how to educate their people and build some roads for them. That's what they need. They don't need handouts. They don't need money that the dictators and despots will put in their own Swiss bank accounts and send them bags of food. That doesn't work. We need to teach people how to grow their own food. It's the old story about teaching a man to fish as opposed to giving him a fish. That's what we need to do. We need to help these countries, and we start doing that one or two at a time. And then we get them aligned with us and their countries that will support us and work with us and vote with us for the things that are really needed, not the things that somebody else wants. Okay, got that going now. Huh? So anyway, that's my story on the UN, and I'm sticking to it. And what I'm saying is, where there is no vision, the people perish, and where Americans have no vision, the American people will perish. So we got to have a vision. I'm bringing the vision to you. I'm showing you what's wrong and what to do about it. Nobody's telling you what to do about it. Now, I haven't given you all the details and everything. That's why you need to get the book. Read the book. It's all in there. It tells you how to do all this. All these problems are solved. And I dare anybody, I challenge anybody, I dare anybody to come back to me in this book and say, what you got in this book won't work, or this is wrong. Come on. I challenge you. I dare you to. Can you really come back and read this and then come back and tell me it won't work, or it's wrong, or it doesn't make any sense, or it's not for we the people? Get my book. Buy my book. Hey, I'm out here all on my own. This is all coming out of my savings. I'm down to very little, and I'm doing this all for our country because I want to pay it back. I've got a newsletter. Subscribe to my newsletter. Tell everybody to subscribe to it. Now, if you're watching this, you guys have probably bought my book, and you probably read my articles, and you watch these TV shows, and you read my newsletters. I need you to help me with my 2020 movement. That's what it is. We have a movement in America today called the 2020 Clear Vision Movement. That's my movement. That's the movement to solve the problems for the people. And if you've been watching these videos all along since I first started, I've done about more than 20 of them. I've done some with some very great guests, and those were very informative. And I also did a lot of them by myself, just like this. And the whole idea of it was to inform you, to help you, because that's what I want to do. I want to pay it back to Americans because I've had such a great opportunity and such a great life myself. And if I have to spend every penny I own, then I have to maybe do this TV show. I have to, climb out from underneath the bridge and get somebody to let me use their TV for an hour. I'll do that, whatever it takes. So spread the word. Help me out. Share this with people. Tell people about it. Tell people to watch this. Watch my stuff. Because nobody's telling you these things the way I'm telling you. Okay. Told you, where there's no vision, the people perish. And I also talked about the best form of government is government that's small, not a big bureaucracy like we have now. It's limited. That means it's limited in power, limited in regulations and ruling us. And it's close to home. It's local government where we can redress the government close to home. We can talk to people. You ever try to talk to somebody in Washington, D.C., a congressman or a senator? You can't do it. I can't talk to my Congress and my senators. Rubio ain't listened to me. And Nelson, I've been writing to him for years, and he never listens to me. In fact, he quit sending me his newsletter because every time he wrote it, he sent out his monthly newsletter. I wrote back scathing comments about how screwed up he was. And I was really respectful. I never once accused him of having his brain fried when he walked in space. You know, I mean, this guy's an astronaut and he's an idiot. You know, how do you figure? And that's what we got in Washington, D.C. Those are the people we're idolizing. We got people in Florida that adore Bill Nelson. Ha! That's what we got. God bless us all. God bless you. God bless everybody that's watching. God bless all the people you're going to share this with. And God bless America. God bless our servicemen and gals, guys and gals that are out there in all these places like Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia, places in Africa we don't even know about. And God bless all of our first responders, police and firefighters and EMTs, all those people that dedicate themselves to us. And God save our America, because we need you now more than ever before. Thanks for watching, boys and gals. Look forward to seeing you next time.